If your creative push has helped you, you can help the show by becoming a patron on Patreon. For $20, $10, $5, or $1 a month, you can not only show your support of the podcast, but also do so much to help to cover all the costs. Head to yourcreativepush.com/Patreon to find out all of the goodies that you can get when you become a patron at each of the levels, and thank you in advance for helping this show. Your Creative Push, episode 213.
Your people are here. We're all around you, and we all feel it. There is something moving and changing in the world, and you are meant to be part of it.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Martha Beck. Martha is an American sociologist, life coach, best-selling author, and speaker who specializes in helping individuals and groups achieve personal and professional goals. Her books include Expecting Adam, Leaving the Saints, Finding Your Own North Star, The Joy Diet, and her newest book, Diana Herself, An Allegory of Awakening. She has also been a columnist for the Oprah Magazine, since its inception in 2001. Her newest project is a revolutionary writing workshop called Write into Light. Martha, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you so much for being here. It's really an honor. I was wondering, before we get into all the many things that you do, if you could kind of give us a summary of how you got to the point you are today in your life.
Just blundering forward.
Blundering forward.
No, I mean, I started out as a kid very sort of driven and high achieving, and then I started having a number of experiences, especially the birth of my son who has Down syndrome. He was born when I was 25 years old, and getting my third Harvard degree, and it changed completely the way I viewed the world and the meaning of a human life. And from that time forward, I stopped being really in line with the culture. And I became convinced I had to make a decision when I was pregnant whether or not to keep this baby. And he was well cooked. He was, I was into my 6th month of pregnancy. So it wasn't a light decision, even though I'm politically pro-choice. I chose to keep him because I started to think about what made a human life worth living, what made a person worth entering, allowing to enter the world. And I decided it was the experience of joy, because without that, who cares? If you're depressed your whole life and you're very achieving, big deal. However, if you can be happy and you don't look good in the eyes of the world, your life from the inside will still be worth living. So that changed the whole way I went at everything. And I ended up doing a really sort of circuitous, like romping through any field I felt like entering at the moment, and writing books that were off genre and coaching people. It turned out to be a life coaching event. And it just unfolded. It unfolded because I was on this hell-bent path of pursuing joy. So that's kind of how I got here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the way that everybody should kind of approach life, is to kind of approach that joy no matter what anybody else kind of thinks about it. And I think that's a really hard thing to get over.
Yeah, it's really hard, but it's so worth it.
Yeah. Do you have any suggestions for people that need to kind of make that brave decision, that brave kind of life coaching moment?
Yeah, there's one day I was watching footage of the tsunami that leveled Sendai, Japan. I think it was in 2011. Mm-hmm. Betraying my age here. And I watched a 6-minute video of one single tidal wave destroying an entire village and picking up the buildings and carrying them away. I mean, it flattened everything. And some people ran for shelter into the buildings that were already there. And those buildings got destroyed, and I'm sure many, many people died inside them. And then how you hit related things by accident in your YouTube feed? Mm-hmm. Accidentally, I tuned in on a man who was surfing in a surfing competition, and he ended up surfing a freak wave. They're called rogue waves, that was abnormally big. It ended up being 7 stories high, and you can watch this guy. And at the height of the wave, you see this sheer wall that is 7 stories high. And here's this man, a naked man on a board, is going out to confront that wave. And he not only stays on his feet through the whole thing, and it looks like it's going to kill him. And instead, he not only stays on his feet, but has the ride of his life. And I watched those two over and over again because my sociological training has told me for many, many decades that we are in a tsunami level time of change. And that if we run into solid structures that have always worked in the past, we may be completely destroyed. Whereas if we go out and confront the elements with our wits and our sort of putting our being on the line, we can have the ride of our lives. This is the time when you have to function like that. All the other options are being taken away. Nothing else is working anymore. So as crazy daring as it seems, just know that if you try to stick with what's familiar, you may get smushed. And if you do what seems risky, you may have the most amazing experience you could imagine and beyond what you could imagine.
That's the most beautiful kind of analogy I've ever heard. It's so true though. And it does seem like this huge daunting thing that can kind of crush you because of all like the norms that society tells you that you have to be this certain thing, or your parents tell you that you have to be this certain thing. And it looks like it could crush you, but if you kind of grab onto that board and kind of take it, you could take it for a ride. I love that.
Yeah, and the board is your joy. And may I just say that even though for some reason I've always, because of the Oprah thing or something, my audience has always been mainly female. But let me just say that mainly right now it's the men who are under so much social pressure to stay in the old patterns. Women can kind of get away with, I'm going to quit and have a baby, and then I'm going to start a bake shop in Maine and whatever. But men are still heavily, almost unbelievably heavily socially pressured to do what used to work, and it doesn't work anymore. And then they blame themselves. And other people blame them. And I call this the man cage, and it's a horrible thing. So I want all your listeners to be really aware. If you're male, I get how much you may be suffering, but you've got to be brave. You got to grab a surfboard. You got to go out there anyway.
Got to man up.
Man up. It's sad to say, but it's tough times, but you'll get through them if you surf.
I love it. It's very true. And you mentioned that for women, having a baby and then doing the other thing, like the idea of having children, kind of being a pause point almost, like to stop pursuing your creative goals. But I mean, you are now an insanely busy person, and you were back then as well, having 3 children and getting 3 degrees from Harvard. So what was the trick there to be able to kind of balance all of that at the same time?
I did a study on women in the late 20th century. I interviewed all these women, and there were people who had skipped their careers and felt awful about that. And then there were women who had skipped having children and felt awful about that. And then there were the ones that seemed to have done both successfully. And I asked them, how did you do it? And they all gave me the same answer. They all said, okay, there are about 10 years that I don't remember at all. And then I had a nervous breakdown. So women were in the crucible at that point too. I don't know. I mean, I'm not physically strong. I got really sick. I didn't sleep enough. It wasn't easy. I kept trying to give up. I kept trying to say, okay, uncle, I can't do this. This is too hard. I have not slept in like 12 years. And I literally did have 12 years of chronic pain that arose mainly from exhaustion, I think. And now I'm on this really, what feels to me like the surfing that I'm doing is this risky feeling path of it's okay to rest. And if you are working with you mentioned magic before we got on the recording, there is a magic in the world. And I found that when my son was born. The thing that made me want to keep him wasn't any moral, courage or anything. It was that from the moment I became pregnant with him, I became psychic. I mean, I would see things my then husband was doing on his trips to Asia, and I would see correctly what was happening to him and then be able to check it out with him. And I thought, what? And everything became very magical. It went down a lot. The sense of that went down after my son was born. He seems to carry it with him. But so I was completely spent and like emotionally, physically devastated. And I just said, okay, if there's some kind of a consciousness in the universe that is actually creating this magical way of living, then maybe it can get another Harvard PhD and maybe it can raise these kids. And I started after many years of exhaustion, I started doing research on people who had undergone the experience that in the East they call awakening. They universally, from all cultures and all historical periods, said, if you can align yourself with what wants to happen, things will be done through you that you cannot do yourself. So Lao Tzu, my favorite Chinese philosopher, says, less and less do you need to force things until you arrive at non-action. When nothing is done, nothing remains undone.
Mm.
Yeah, and the sort of translation of that is, Eckhart Tolle says this in our time, once you've aligned with your own true nature and what wants to happen in the world through you, it's not you doing it. You have caught the wave, and the wave is creating the energy that's necessary to do what you are meant to do in the world. And your job is just to balance. And the way you balance is by staying in your joy. And that includes resting enough, and that includes playing enough. It includes loving enough. And it's freaking scary because the culture is like a big factory. That is literally what we're basing our cultural models on, is a factory that never stops working. And to let that go and say, I'm going to trust that magic will do things through me if I just relax, oof, that's not for the faint of heart. But it works.
Yeah, it's tough to relax. I like that idea of, with what wants to happen, like it's outside of you, and it's, as a creative person, when you can kind of find that flow state, it is almost like letting go, and it's like something that happens almost outside of you, or like kind of through you, and it's like you're not even part of the experience, which is like totally magic.
Except you get to watch, and it's like when you really, speaking of surfing, there are certain sports that help people do this, like rock climbing and skiing, things where your life is on the line, so you become very, very present in the moment, and you're not anywhere else. And then you feel something. This is why people go out and ski and surf and do this stuff. There's a moment where the consciousness of the intelligence of life takes over your body and says, I can do this. And you suddenly are performing way above what you know your capacity to be. And that's addictive. And that, I think, is kind of what I'm obsessed with experiencing over and over and over again. And I just go where it takes me.
Yeah, and the funny part is that the chasing of that, the finding of that, comes from kind of letting go.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I had some clients once who wanted to start a whole business based on what they called the spiritual sports, which are sports that help you do that. And their slogan was, if you have to ask, you've never had the feeling. Once you've had the feeling, you know. Yeah,
it's so true. And the other thing, you did a TED Talk called The 4 Technologies of Magic. We'll have that linked in the show notes page. And in that, I found one of the most interesting kind of points of that was to kind of, when you get that inspiration or that connection to the universe or whatever it is that makes you creative, it's going to let go of you at some point and to just rest whenever it does that. Yeah. And I think that's like a difficult thing for a lot of people. They just want to keep pushing it. So can you talk a little bit about the idea of kind of letting go of that and letting it kind of happen naturally?
Yeah, I've already mentioned that everything in our culture is based on factory productivity and the maximizing of wealth through physical creation, the creation of physical wealth. And even the school system, if you think about it, it was never, there's nothing in the laws of nature that say you should take same age children and put them in rows in desks or circles or whatever it is, and then have them all do the same problems at the same time, solving the problems to get praise or blame, doing things the teacher already knows about, and just completely tapped into what people are wanting them to do all the time. That is a description of a factory. And the school system that most of us have been through was created so that we could churn out factory workers out of all these children. The way the human brain works best, we now know for sure from brain studies, is outside in nature, moving all the body, using all 5 senses, and solving problems that are necessary, like how do you make fire when you need fire? That is the kind of thing that really helps you learn at absolute rocket speed. And when you go out there in nature and you're doing that, part of what happens is you're aware of your body and your body's cycles. So when it's time to rest, you don't see animals pushing themselves through exhaustion unless they're running from a predator or something. And when we continuously push ourselves, we actually go blind and deaf to our body's signals, which are tuned to the magic, might I say. The body is part of the magic. It's like a magic wand. It's what gets used by the magic to do things with your life. And if you don't hear or feel the call to rest and play, which is what all animals do when they get tired of working, whatever their work is, hunting or eating or whatever it is. If you don't listen to that, you go completely off the frequency and you can't hear yourself. You can't feel yourself. You go numb. And then you just like work for 78 hours and then drink a bottle of whiskey because you feel icky. And that way is not the way into the magic. You got to respect nature, and that means respecting the body and the way it wants to exist, which again is totally contradictory to our socialization. So it's an act of enormous courage. But again, it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like that idea of the body being like a magic wand, and also the interconnectedness of all living beings. You mentioned that as well. Just the fact that we're not supposed to be sitting next to each other and, heads down and kind of plugging away as like a little cog in the machine. We're supposed to be like looking at each other and figuring out new ways to make new machines, Right.
New solutions, new inventions, things that will fix what we've broken in the world. The potential is limitless if we can get free from the social strictures.
Absolutely. So I was wondering if you could talk about Right into Light.
Yeah, this started for me. I was watching the election. I'll just come out and say it. And I did not have a positive emotional response to the election and its outcome.
Oh, wow. I know. That's the first time I've ever heard that.
I know. I'm weird that way. And I thought, okay, I could either sit here in despair, or I could start writing letters to my Congress people, which did not give me a feeling of joy. It gave me a feeling of ugh, because the system just looks so broken, and I don't really trust it. I don't trust the system of government, the system of economics that we've got to take the world to a better place quickly. And if you look at the science, we need to go to a better place quickly, just in terms of the ecosystems that support our lives. So I thought, okay, what can I do? And I found this quote from Toni Morrison, where she said, this is the time. She was reacting to an election that she didn't much like. But she says, this is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. And I thought, good on you, Toni. I'm going to listen to this. So what do I love? What's my favorite thing? And how can I use it, to try to do as much as I can to change things quickly? And I decided that it was artists need to speak up and start writing language that gives us, because here's the thing. Culture doesn't actually come from laws. Laws may reflect culture, but they rarely create culture unless they're very, very repressive, and then it's not good. What creates healing in cultures is new idioms, new language, new ways to talk about what's happening to us, new perceptions, new insights, new ideas, and those come from creativity. So this podcast, that's why I wanted to do your podcast, because I thought, he's one of the people who's reaching out to the whole world through creative activity and encouraging creative activity. And I thought, what can I do? And I was talking to Liz Gilbert, who's a dear friend, and we were talking about how we both write our way into knowing what the hell to do, on a night like the election night, when you're just sitting there going, what? I realized we both use writing as a kind of self-coaching tool, I guess you could say. And if readers have read Eat, Pray, Love, that's kind of what she does. I mean, she starts out sitting on the bathroom floor begging for help, and she sort of hears an inner voice telling her that she can go back to bed. It's a very loving voice, a very healing voice. And we were doing some of these exercises together that we've both used all our lives to make writing into a source of our own sort of personal development and spiritual engagement and magical, healing. And I thought, we've been doing this. Why don't we get a whole bunch of people to do it? So we created a writing course, which is all about, it's called Write into Light, because it's using writing not to get published and get famous or whatever, but using it to heal yourself. In other words, to go closer to your own enlightenment. And then finding this alchemy at the center of that experience, where it turns and wants the healing that has come to you personally, wants to go out to others. So that's what we're doing. We're halfway through our first session. There are 2 more, one in, I think, July and one in September. So, and anybody can sign up if they want to. You can go to my website if you want to join us, because it's amazing. It is amazing what people are writing. We give them the exercise, which is go into yourself, find your own magic, find your own healing, and then wait for it to express itself through you. And holy smokes, we've gotten great stuff out of it. And it's the kind of stuff we want it to go out as memes, as ideas that replicate themselves into the culture. So it can be anything. It could be a blog post. It could be a bumper sticker, as long as it sticks in the mind and changes the way people believe and feel in a positive direction. So that's my big thing now. We've got lots and lots of people doing this, and the power of the collective community doing this with that kind of mindfulness is frankly the biggest magic I've ever felt. It's amazing.
Well, I absolutely love that project, and you're right. Writing for me in my in my life has been the best form of therapy, and also like figuring out what I really think about the world and what I think about like my current situation and everything like that. So I can't kind of recommend that notion enough. And I really like that idea of. My friend Thomas Dodd was just on the show, a photographer. He was talking about the same thing. He had this like year-long creative block that was mostly due to the election cycle and just the negativity that people were spewing around. Right. And he came to the same conclusion that as a creative person, it's kind of our job to, like, when stuff like that happens, instead of getting sucked into it, becoming a victim of it, choosing like to go with that call to arms and become like a creative soldier to spread these messages of joy, of hope, of love, and to kind of express yourself in that way, and to bring something new into the conversation as opposed to kind of joining in the drivel.
Yep, that's exactly it. And I think probably the election was one of the best catalysts we could have experienced. It didn't feel great, but it definitely lit a fire under me in terms of, gee, how do I use what little power I have, what creativity I have to make things better right now, instead of waiting for the asylum to reform itself once the lunatics are already running it,
Yeah, absolutely. It's like when you get sick and you throw up and then you feel better.
Exactly.
Like you need to get through it.
I am vomiting art into the world and trying to bring people with me. That's exactly it.
Oh, what a beautiful notion.
Thank you. It's really sweet.
So can we also talk about your latest book and kind of where that came from and how that process was?
Yeah, I became more and more, as the years went by, I did self-help and I wrote self-help and all of that, but I was also using my own methods, and they take you pretty quickly to traditions for healing the self that are very ancient. And of course, one of the most effective is meditation. So I was meditating up a storm, and I started getting really powerfully this feeling of something moving through me. And at a certain point, it said, you need to buy this ranch in California and go out there. And I knew the ranch would be contiguous with a national forest, and it would be an old growth forest place and everything. Never seen the place, but I would wake up with it in my mind's eye almost every morning until I could see everything that was there. And I just went online, Googled ranches for sale on the California coast that had all these structures on it. And there was only one ranch that was available, and it cost exactly all my money.
Exactly.
Yes. So for my 50th birthday, when you're supposed to be saving, I spent literally all my money on a ranch in California, did not know why, moved out there into this forest, and just felt pulled outside every day. And things started happening to me. I started interacting with animals in ways that were very unexpected. And in particular, there was a wild boar there are wild boars in California.
Oh, wow.
Hunters released them to hunt them, and then some of them escaped and bred. And I was tracking this wild boar around my property, and I started to get the feeling that it was playing with me. I started just tuning into that, and I ended up writing a novel about a woman who gets lost in the woods, and the reason that she's there is to wake up, is to achieve her own enlightenment. Not that I have, but I had this feeling that that's whatever was moving me toward that. And I think an experience like Eckhart Tolle had, or like Byron Katie had, some of the great spiritual teachers of our age, may be what needs to happen to many people in order to change the world enough to save ourselves in the near future. So I started playing with a sort of fantasy novel, which is nothing like anything I've ever written. Mm. And I went to my agent and the editors who'd published me, and they were like, no, we don't think so. And I thought, I don't want to modify this into a self-help book. I don't want to write what I've been writing. I want to write this. I want to write what's really happening to me, which is not really believable except as fiction. And so I created a publishing company and published it myself. And I just want to, I don't usually do this, but it just happened. So I'm kind of tooting my horn. We just received a gold medal from the Independent Publishers Association. They're called the IPPIs, for the best visionary fiction of the year, and also the best cover of the year, which is an oil painting that I did based on what I was experiencing. Yeah. So I just felt like in such shame because, here I am self-publishing. This is the lowest you can sink. If you're like a best-selling author going to self-publication, oh my God, how have the mighty fallen, or whatever. Really mortifying, but I wanted to do it like everything. The paper, the cover picture, everything had to come from the magic for me. So I didn't do it alone. There were a lot of amazing people working with me, but it wasn't traditional publishing. And I also wanted to say to people, I tell you to go out on a surfboard, I'm going to do it.
Right. You practice what you preach.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I have to practice what I preach. So, yeah, we got some awards, and people it's been very well received. And I just want to encourage people that if you feel like, yeah, okay, I'm going to go and start my own cottage industry, but I've failed now. I want to tell you, you are on the brink of a different kind of success. And I really felt like a failure. And I have been, again, it's been magical, the way that the book has gone through the world, and the people that have connected with me because they've read it. And it just is it works, you guys. The magic works. You may have to wait. You may have to be on the edge of that wave looking down 7 stories down a vertical face that is set to kill you. But if you hold your balance, it does work.
I love it. Yeah, it is trusting that kind of intuition, that voice that tells you to go out into the woods, that tells you that there is this connection with this animal, that maybe you should be writing about this, and maybe you should be self-publishing, and kind of everything that everybody tells you not to do. Just like perhaps like not birthing your son. It's like you have to ignore completely and just trust like that intuition inside of you, and just go forward and just kind of trust that you will be able to maintain your balance.
Yep. And it's not easy because we have to go beyond culture, because our culture is basically screwing us up big time. It's not a recipe for happiness. So to find happiness, you go beyond culture. And when you go beyond culture, trust me, people are going to be upset with you. And you have to find community. And that's another reason that we did Ride into Light. We wanted people who dare to do that to have each other, because usually it's not more than one person in a given family that dares do that. And you start getting pressure from your family. You need people who go, yeah, I'm with you. I get it. I feel it. It makes no sense logically, but I can feel that what you're doing is in tune with this change that is trying to happen in the world, so that we don't destroy our own home.
Mm. Yeah, and that's one of the purposes of this podcast, is to kind of bring people together, or to kind of provide evidence that yes, no matter who you are, you could be a best-selling author, you could be a world famous artist, we all kind of have these same kind of doubts, these same struggles against society that tell us, one thing when we know in our heart to do another thing.
That's
and
right.
to kind of come together, the power in that. And also the fact that that's easy to find sometimes on the internet when you're searching for it, because it's like, people have collected together. But in real life, it's very hard sometimes to find those people that will give you that kind of affirmation that, yeah, I feel you. I know what you're doing.
Right.
But a lot of those people do have that, I think, inside of them as well. So you kind of have to be like the trailblazer. You have to be the one to kind of start and prove that it can be done for them to kind of get on board as well.
Yeah, and it is scary. That's a big wave, and it could kill you. So you have to really commit. You have to really commit, and and especially for guys right now, it's really, really hard, but it works, and you can do it. Yeah. Listen to Young Man Brown.
Listen to me. That's awesome. Martha, before we let you go, it's time for what I call the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, which is probably all of them, and just give them your best words of advice and really just push them to pursue their creative passion.
Yeah, okay. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to close your eyes. I want you to forget past and forget future and focus. I'm going to do the meditation thing. Focus on this breath, this breath, this breath. This is all you need to do is this breath. And then I want you to feel for what brings you joy. And I want you to ignore reason, ignore logic, and just go with the feeling. I don't want it to be in your head. I want it to be in your guts. I want you to feel what you were meant to experience in this life, what you are here to feel. And ask yourself 2 questions. How do I want to be different because I've lived on this earth? And then how do I want the earth to be different because I've lived on it? And I want you to think about those 2 questions to the exclusion of everything else. And then wait for what arises inside you and write it down before you judge it. And then you can sort of come out of the trance state and look at what you've written that you need to do with your life, and then find community to support you in doing it, because it's going to be so damn scary. You're going to be very frightened to do it on your own. And you can start with this podcast and people who listen to it. But your people are here. We're all around you. We may be in virtual space, but we're all around you, and we all feel it. There is something moving and changing in the world, and you are meant to be part of it. So jump. I'm doing a thing in the Rocky Mountains called the Leap Retreat, which is about daring to jump when you're in that space. And that's on my website too, if you want to. But I just want to say, whatever is calling you, leap into it. Don't walk, jump. It's the only way. Jump right into the middle of what scares you most, as long as it also makes your heart beat the way it beats when you fall in love. We call it falling for a reason. So, I'm going to push you out the door now. Put in the seat of your pants and open the airplane door and just kick you out into space, and I'll see you on the ground.
That's you're literally pushing them. I love it. Martha, thank you so much for coming on the show and for giving us that push.
Thank you, young man. Thanks for doing everything that you're doing. You're leaping.
Absolutely. Well, I try. So thank you.
Okay.
And you can find Martha on her website, which is marthabeck.com. And we'll have links to everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/MarthaBeck. Martha, thank you again.
Thanks, young man.
I mean, wow. I hope you are as awestruck as I am after this episode. And you probably already know what I'm going to go back to in my little summary here. And it's that profound example that Martha brought up about the difference between that tsunami video and the video of the guy riding the huge wave. How if you go in to seek shelter from this giant, powerful wave of life, by going into the structures, the safe buildings, the safe structures like everyone else, there's no guarantee that you will be safe. They can all come crumbling down. Or you could be completely safe and just watch as life floats right by you. And when the water is receded and life's over, you're in the exact same place that you were when it was time to make a brave decision. The alternative, of course, is to take that scary wave for a ride and perhaps end up somewhere completely different, somewhere totally new and exciting, while everyone else is stuck on the top story of a building, waiting for rescue to come from somewhere else. waiting for somebody else to plop them out of their life that they have created for themselves. And meanwhile, you've created something new. And the best part is that when you look back, you can be happy that you went for the ride of your life. You won't look back with regret. And like Martha said, the most important part of that whole thing, of taking that ride, is to make sure that you are riding the surfboard with joy written on it, because it will stay afloat as long as you are following that intuition of what makes you the happiest out of life. It is scary to go against kind of the structural norms like we were saying, but if that's what your heart is telling you to do, you need to do it. So just so many good things from this episode. I can't even believe that Martha came on the show. It was really an honor to have her on. I've been following her for a long time, and I hope that you are as inspired as I was after this episode. Also, Martha talked about community and how we are all around you for support, even if it is kind of in a virtual world. And I have definitely found that in the new Facebook group that we've created. You can get there at yourcreativepush.com/group. The amount of support that people are giving to one another is amazing. It is one of those things where I was just kind of pushing it off because I didn't think enough people would join. But right from the jump, the few people that joined were super supportive of each other, had a lot to say, had a lot of discussions to bring up about things that are going on in their life, and also to help out other people with their struggles and give them advice. And as the group has continued to grow, that support has only gained momentum, and it's become this for lack of a better example, tidal wave of support. So definitely at least check that group out, yourcreativepush.com/group. It has become one of my favorite results of this podcast, to see people sharing their work, coming together, starting to collaborate with one another, and to work out the specific problems that you're having that might not get addressed in that particular week's episode. So I can't recommend that enough, and I look forward to meeting you there. On Thursday's show, we have David Luong. David is a senior cinematic artist at Blizzard Entertainment, which, if you don't know, is kind of like the Disney of video games. They've worked on Diablo, World of Warcraft, Overwatch, StarCraft, big games, and he is a very talented guy, and he had a lot of really cool stuff to say about the creative process, working with a team, about doing his own personal work on the side and balancing that, as well as opening his own gallery for digital artists. So I had a really fun conversation with him, and you can find him if you want to check out his work at davidluong.net. That's DAVIDLUONG.net, or we'll have it linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/213. But that's all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done, so go and get it done. Ride that surfboard of joy. Continue to get to your passion no matter what anybody else says, and we will see you on Thursday if you need that push again. I love you all, and we'll see you then. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.